Oliver, then chances are the two of you will be in alignment.
Well, and that's what's worked. And Oliver, Barbara goes out and finds a lot of so many incredible guests, and it's been so awesome. I set up a talker at the beginning, but really I love to hear other people's stories and how they've arrived to where they are now. So I'd love to hear I'd love to hear about you.
Indeed. So the alignment right off the bat, right, is that all of us have spent some time in Michigan.
Nice.
So Barbara said she spent some time in Michigan. She told me that you live in Michigan currently.
Yeah.
I spent a significant amount of time, my formative years, if you will, became an adult in Michigan. So I'm born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland, inner city kid, born to Caribbean parents. I went to college in Michigan, in a very small town in Southwest Michigan. Barbara said she was close to Detroit.
Yeah.
I was. So in reference to Detroit, I was about 3 hours west of Detroit, actually sitting on the border of Michigan and Indiana. So I was really close to, I could drive, maybe 15, 20, let's call it 25 minutes to South Bend, Indiana, to Notre Dame. So I was right there on Lake Michigan. So Berrien Springs, Benton Harbor.
Okay.
St. Joseph, Michigan, right there.
Yeah.
And
Nice
I
area.
actually lived there. I left home a month before my 18th birthday.
Wow.
And I did not return to Maryland until I was in my 30s.
Wow. So you were there for a long time.
There for a significant amount of time. Yeah. And it is a very significant piece of my story. Where I find myself today in life is the sum of the good and bad that happened during that part of my life. Literally, that part of my life shapes everything that's happening right now, good and bad. Good and bad. There's some mistakes that I've made. My shirt says 2020 before hindsight, which comes right out of my book that I wrote for men. And the goal of that is the 2020 before hindsight mantra is really about me helping somebody to gain some level of clarity on the front end so that they don't have to run into some of the scenarios, friendships, choices that may throw off the trajectory of your life. Because that piece of my Michigan life, there are some things that happened during those years that I'm still paying for right now. Literally. Like I'm not saying that just
to say that.
Right. I mean, literally today. What's today? It's November the 22nd.
Yeah.
I'm still paying for some of that stuff I did in Michigan all those years ago. So it has significantly shaped who I am. It has been a part of my growth experience. It has been a part of my journey. So to give you the story, if you want the backstory,
I'm on pins and needles. I'm like,
let's do it.
On the edge of my seat.
Let's do it. So let's go back to 17. So 17, I leave home, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, ready to go. I am driving from Maryland. I'm with a group of people that are driving from Maryland to Michigan. Never been on that side of the country ever in my life in those 17 years. Born and raised, city kid, been here all my life, Baltimore, Maryland. But I'm daydreaming. I'm like, man, this college, this is going to be great. I'm going to get a great degree. I'm going to get a great job. I'm going to make a lot of money. I'm going to meet this beautiful girl. We're going to get married. I'm thinking eons down the road as I'm driving down. I think what we take? I think we took 70 to 80, I think. And 80 took us all the way into Michigan. Yep. So I'm doing that, right? Daydreaming, loving life. Can't wait to see what happens. Fast forward. Life doesn't happen that way. I mean, not even close. So I go out there for a broadcasting degree, believe it or not. So you talked about being in voice heaven, Barbara. Yeah. I went out there I said, you know what? I'm going to be on radio or television at some point in my life. Go out there to get a broadcasting degree. In my before I take one broadcasting class. So I'm about a year and a half into my college experience. And, in the beginning, you're taking the prereqs and all that kind of stuff.
Gen eds, yeah.
I haven't taken one broadcasting class. They phased the program out.
Wow.
Now, here's the thing. Not only do they phase the program out, but it's an expensive private university. So now I'm in debt. So I can't go anywhere because they won't release my transcript. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go home. But it doesn't make any sense to go home because I can't go back to school anywhere if I go home. So I'm like, all right, what am I going to do? That began a myriad of disappointments and bad choices. So I stayed there, obviously, because I told you I lived there for a significant amount of time. I stayed there. I was in and out of school. I decided to do journalism. I was like, I don't know if that's what I want to do. Switch to communications. I don't know if that's what I want to do. I think I want to do communications. So we're going to stay there just so I can get a degree. Didn't have the best advisor. My minor was graphic design. Now think about that for a second. Had I simply flipped graphic design to be my major, we'd be having a different conversation right now. Because who knows what I would have been doing. But then the disappointments came, one after the other, after the other, after the other. And after a while, I just started to welcome them. And I was telling somebody I did a talk recently, and I said I took all those disappointments and made them a badge of honor. I used that badge of honor as a license to act even worse.
Even worse.
So now I'm like, okay, if this is what life is going to be like, I'm just going to own it.
Yeah.
Be crazy and reckless, and I'm going to do all this kind of stuff. Now, fast forward, there is a part of the story, you know, I was daydreaming at 17, going down the road. Part of that did come true. I did meet a wonderful woman, and I ended up getting married in Michigan. We've been married for 22 years, so she stuck with me.
Nice.
However, when I got married, that badge of honor, all of that baggage, all of that stuff that I had internalized, my view of the world as a result, because I'm like heavily underproducing at this point, right? We're talking about going from underproducing to overcoming, right? I'm heavily underproducing at this point. I take all of that ideology into my marriage. You can only imagine the result of that.
Yeah.
Everything you're imagining, you're probably spot on in terms of what that looked like when we got married. So I get married for the wrong reasons. Very selfish guy, very angry, very disappointed, shouldering a lot of pain, trying to figure out how to navigate life, looking through a lens of, man, nothing's going right. Take that into my marriage, and I'm treating her as though marriage is a space where duality reigns. I'm approaching that scenario with a singular mindset.
Singular mindset, yeah.
I'm living like a single guy. I'm thinking like I'm living like a single guy, like literally.
Yeah.
So let's fast forward the story. You heard I'm living like a single guy. One morning I come in at 4 a.m., which is normal for me at this point. We're about 18 months into our marriage. It's normal for me to do that. But what's crazy is, though, all through all that time that I talked to you about, I grew up in church. My parents are church folks. So I have that balance, if you want to call it that. It wasn't really. It was very heavily imbalanced at this point. But I had that small cord of values and that thought process that goes behind that. So I was reading a devotion still during this time, coming in from the club, doing this thing, going here, going there. Whenever I would touch down 2, 3, 4, 5 a.m., just sometimes getting back just in time to get ready for work, I would still sit down and read this thing. So fast forward, this is the turning point, because we're talking about going from underproducing to overcoming. Here's a turning point in my life right here. 18 months into my marriage. I come in one night, 4 a.m. What I didn't tell you is I had 2 small girls at the time as well. So I come in 4 a.m. I'm reading this devotion. In the devotion, you can journal. It would ask you a question, give you this thought to process, and you would journal. I would write something every night. I still have it. It's upstairs to this day. Still have the book. 4 a.m. I'm reading the journal. I'm writing. Still bitter about life. Like, what is this going to do? You know, all of my dreams that I had are just dissipated. I have a thought that pops into my head. And again, we talked about this, Barbara. Nothing happens. There's no such thing as things happening by chance, right? It's not just a thought pops in my head, but I'm going to use that phrasing. Here's the thought. If those 2 little girls that are sleeping down the hall from where you are currently reading this book, if they grow up and they bring this current version of you home, what are you going to do?
Ooh.
Whoa.
So here's what's crazy. What I didn't tell you is that I'm a recovering hothead. I could go from 0 to 100 like that. And because I had all of this stuff pent up in me, so it was real easy to go from 0 to 100 because I got all this disappointment, got all this anger, got all this frustration, and I'm actually it gives me license to pop off on you, right? So my answer is through that lens. I'm like, oh, that ain't gonna be no problem. Because only 2 can survive, only 1 can survive. And I'm surviving. So yeah, bring whoever you want. That ain't gonna be a problem. I'm gonna take care of that because that's not gonna happen. Here's the next thought. So I have that moment in my mind, that pop off moment in my mind. Immediately, it's almost like somebody was sitting next to me saying this next statement. Okay. If that's how you feel, what are you going to do about you?
What a powerful question.
And here's the thing. It was so powerful. In fact, I was just sharing this with somebody not too long ago. It literally, the way I describe it, and I can right now as I'm saying it, I could feel it. It was like somebody hit me in the chest. My chest actually got tight when I said that just now. And it felt like somebody literally punched me in the chest. And I remember the green sofa. I remember it like it was last night. I just leaned back. And I didn't have an answer. Here's what I did know at that moment, though. I was like, it can't be like this forever. We can't keep underproducing. I can't keep hurting that woman. I can't keep hurting myself. I can't keep sitting in this disappointment. I can't own this. This can't define me. I have absolutely no idea how to fix that. But I do know that it can't keep going on like that. And that moment was the turnaround moment. Now, was I a knucklehead after that? Absolutely. But what it did was it literally turned me in a different direction. And I was like, okay, I got to figure it out. I got to figure out what kind of man do I want to be? How do I want to show up? How do I get from underproducing to overcoming? There's so much, and it was daunting because there's so much I have to overcome. I told you in the beginning, right? There are mistakes I'm paying for to this day. So the overcoming process is ongoing. But the things that I had to do, there's 3 things that I started to do, and not right away, but I've kind of figured it out through a lot of different ways. Now, I didn't just figure it out on my own. I had some people, great people that were in my ear. I had some folk that I could look at, and I talk about that in the book as well. But I had to change my mindset. And I know we hear that all the time, and that's very, we say that all the time. That word gets thrown around so much. But I really had to change my perspective. Because here's the thing. I tell this to guys all the time. Your approach typically follows your perspective. If you don't like the results of your approach needs to change. Now, that's where I stopped. Very, very, very good at changing my behavior. I could flip my behavior on a dime. If I'm like, okay, you know what? I gotta hang out with JT and Barbara. So, all right, this is who I'm going to be today. I did it all the time that I was in Michigan. So
Yeah.
here's a piece of the story I didn't tell you. I grew up in church, right? I was involved in church activities while in Michigan. So in the height of my wilding out and all of that, I was a church musician. So I played for choirs, I played for groups, I played for churches all over Southwest Michigan and Northern Indiana. I was in that all the time. Now, the beauty of that is that I didn't realize that until later on, but it did help ground me to something.
Mm.
But I was still doing that all the time. So it was very easy for me to flip when it was time to be the choir director or the lead musician or the this or the that. It was very easy for me to flip, and I could literally leave a service and be somebody totally different.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it was really easy for me to change my behavior. But I
That's
did
the
not.
outward. That was the outward.
That's the outward. But I didn't do anything with my mindset. And that's why I tell guys often, behavioral change without mindset change is not sustainable long term.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's not. So that was one of the things I had to do. The other thing that I did, and I'm still doing to this day, is shadowing my future. Because remember, going back to 17, I had all these big dreams and all these things that I wanted to do. I was like, you know what? I got to find some folk who are actually doing this. And in the book, I talk about taking guys through a 4-step process, which is observation, training, execution, and feedback, where you get to see, like, JT is doing something that I want to do. He's walking a path I want to walk. Let me observe what he's doing. Let me observe how he handles things. Let me observe how he's networking, how he's doing these things, and then try them, and then get to the point where I'm comfortable and then execute, and then go back to JT and be like, hey, bro, I did this, and man, I fell on my face. What happened? We get some feedback, or I rocked it. Let's talk about it. And I had to do that. And the third thing, and then I'll stop talking because I know I'm talking a long time. Third thing is I had to realize that adjustments aren't a threat to my authenticity. Because the reason why me and that beautiful woman of mine that's been with me for 22 years were butting heads in the beginning is because I didn't want her to change me. You're requiring some things of me that I didn't see as adjustments. I saw them as changing me. Not adjustments that would set us up for a great relationship or set us up to win in life.
Yeah.
But that they would change me, and they don't. Adjustments are simply that. They are tweaks that you make that set you up for a greater level, set you, the you that you are, up for a greater level of success.
The you that you want to be. That's how I think of them, as the little tweaks. Like Jason and I, we talk about so often that when we start to want something, and then all of a sudden we decide we're going to do it, and then all of a sudden, we're hearing it all around us. Reticular activation. Yeah. And it's like, oh, right. Because I'm not the only one, but that's the direction that I want to go. And then, and they always say, when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Right. And I thankfully had a guy that I could look up to. I didn't even realize I had a guy who was taking me through that 4-step process. And I didn't even realize it at the time. He was the guy who actually ended up marrying my wife and I. It's like a father figure to me. He's no longer alive, Dr. Anthony Kelly. And I call his name all the time. And he's in the book as well. But I watched him with his wife and his kids. And I was like, I found it. That's what I'm trying to be. Like, how do I want to show up as a man? How do I want to show up as a father? How do I want to show up as a husband?
It's right in front of your face. You didn't even realize it.
Right there.
Because you didn't know what you were looking for. You didn't know what you wanted.
Right. And I spent too much time not looking. I spent so much time internalizing the fact that everything was going wrong and accepting that, and falling into the quote unquote, what I felt like was the safety of just staying in that space, as opposed to the fear of the unknown of stepping out of that and saying, okay, let me try something. And might it end in disappointment? Yes, but that's not the end all be all, nor does it define who I am. I became Mr. Disappointment, as opposed to just Oliver, who has had some rough patches here and there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like you destroyed your life, or your life didn't turn out how it expected to be. It's like like you said, you lived up to the disappointment.
Yep. Yep.
Mhm.
And I tell guys often, you are not defined by your experiences. Now, your experiences can be significant. They can be a catalyst to what's next in your journey,
Yeah.
but they don't define who you are. You have to determine how you want to show up.
Right.
And if you're going to be consistent in that, and if you're going to have some integrity as it relates to that. The other things are experiences that help feed into that process.
Yeah.
You know,
That's like Oliver and I, we were talking just before the show, and just about, we've all had iterations of our training and ourselves and stuff. And I said, when I first got into coaching and training, I thought I was going to work with widows, because that was my story at the time, that I was a widow and I could, and I had survived it, but that wasn't who I was meant to work with.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't not broad enough, not a narrow enough, because so many of the widows, they don't want to move past being a widow, because that's where they get their identity.
Yeah.
And and so, but now that's one of the things. It's like, oh, right, that's who you want to work with. I want to work with people who right now and Jason and I have talked about this, because he lived in Michigan and worked around the plants, the auto plants, that so many people, they come out of their work and they've only defined themselves by their job title or their job description.
Mm-hmm.
And they come out and they have no idea of who they are outside of that.
Yeah.
And they don't make the transition.
Yeah. And it's tough.
Exactly what you're talking about too, is making the transition from being disappointed. All right, these things happened, but now I can move forward in this direction.
Yeah.
Or create the life that you want to have, as opposed to continuing to create that life of what you don't want, because you're attracting more and more of that in there.
That's right. And that's the thing. You will begin to attract, you said it, you will begin to attract that.
Right.
Because that is the thing that you're focusing on. Right. The thing you focus on is the thing you're going to see.
Yeah.
It's just how it works. If I continue to look at the screen, I see the two of you. If I look over here, I see the door. I see something different.
Right.
And so what do I want to focus on? Where do I want to see growth?
Right.
What's the path that I want to take? And realizing that I can own that, and it's okay. And sometimes it's not going to work out, but that's part of the process. Often we're so results driven that we don't take time to enjoy the process. The process is where learning takes place. The process is where growth happens.
Mm-hmm.
The process is where you get to expand your perspective.
Right. To me, it's where the magic happens. The
Yeah.
magic of like when Jason and I met, it was like under really, tragic circumstances, because my girlfriend Pat was killed. And yet now it's a year and a half later, and we're still doing this show. We're having a great relationship, and yet we've never actually met in person.
Okay.
And yet Jason's my best buddy. I can tease him. And,
Beauty of technology. I love it.
Beauty of technology.
Exactly.
I love it. That's awesome. And I think it's important that we lean into that. I think the pandemic, the pandemic did a lot of damage, if you want to use that strong word. But there's some great things that came out of it. And many of us see the world differently.
Mm-hmm.
Many of us value life differently.
Yeah.
Relationships have been formed. Partnerships, collaborations have taken place that probably would have never taken place, otherwise.
Yeah.
We're so busy just being inundated with our routines and chasing whatever that next thing is, that we didn't take time to slow down, and that slowed us down to be able to be like, oh, wait a minute, this is important to me. Like
Yeah.
I should be nurturing this. I should be paying more attention to this. And so that for me, you know, talking about this ongoing process, for me, it's the same thing. I mean, I jumped into entrepreneurship during the pandemic.
Hmm.
And I was already doing this. I was already coaching. I was already speaking, but I was still working in the corporate space. And you know, it's a different ball game. Every stage of your life requires you to really tap back into this. Okay, who am I? How do I want to show up? How am I going to navigate these scenarios in a way that allow me to come out of it more successful, and not necessarily successful as it relates to money. I know we're talking about riches, right? And riches is
that's life, not money. Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? And that the connotation behind that is way broader than many of us care to realize, right?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily about me having a 7, 8 zeros as much as it is really being comfortable with who I am.
Yes.
And really leaning in and enjoying the process.
So true. You know, the big part that I resonated with is when you talked about like that resistance and feeling like she was trying to change you. In like I felt that same exact way early on in my relationship with my wife, and just like I felt like I could be exactly where you're at. It's like I went out and I did things, you know, in opposite, or I felt like resentful, or I felt like these different, you know, I definitely felt a push to do the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I don't want to change into this. Why would she be with me if she's trying to change me? That kind of thing.
Right.
And not realizing and understanding. And I had did a podcast episode with her a few months ago, just like talking about this process of like learning how to communicate with each other. Her perspective, the way she'd come off and tell me things, I felt like she was like pissing in my Cheerios. Like she'd always like ruin my dreams, right? Like tell me what wasn't possible. And that wasn't the case at all. She's the person that wants to plan things out, right? So I felt like she was poking holes in my dream. She was asking relevant questions to help me take my vision and turn it into something. But I looked at it as being defensive. It was all my internal struggles and my, you know, things I had going on with myself. It had nothing to do with her. I felt questioned. I felt like she was exposing me. I felt like she was trying to change me, and I was resentful over that.
Yeah. Listen, I've been there. And it's interesting that you would say that, right? Because there's something called intellectual intimacy. There's different types of intimacy, right? And often what we don't realize now, let's be clear. There are some people who really are trying to ruin your dreams. Like, let's be clear that exists.
Oh, absolutely. There exists.
that exists. Yeah. But in what you just described with you and your wife, right? You realize that she was actually she was expanding your perspective, which actually is to your advantage.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what intellectual intimacy does. It actually helps to expand the perspective by asking questions, by having these dialogues, by throwing something, you know, hey, let me run this by you kind of thing. You know, break this down for me. What do you see that I don't see? Kinds of conversations.
Yes.
That aren't about me attacking you or you attacking me, but is about, hey, listen, I see where you're trying to go. Let's come up with the best possible journey, best case journey for you to get there. Right. And so that's awesome. Cause I was the same guy, bro. Like I did.
And now you look back at it, like I look back at it like, oh my God, like how much easier could my life have been back then? How many unnecessary arguments, how many unnecessary, like just sleeping on the couch or feeling like, you know, this wasn't going to work, or feeling like all these things and all these stresses that I had. Is like now, and again, I've been able to go to another level in my personal growth by opening up that level of intimacy, right? And understanding her strengths and why she's asking those questions, and perceiving things differently, perceiving that, yeah, we both want to change and grow. It's not going to change our overall who we are, but right, that's the meaning of life. We should be changing and growing together. And if we're going to last as a relationship, you'll see that growth. We can be able to look down at it and see it. And now that's fun to be able to see, but it's also like, why didn't I do that earlier? What was that emotion that held me back from doing that?
Yeah, and the thing is, we as I'll speak for men. I won't speak for all men. I'll speak for myself as a man. We're not often taught how to navigate that space
Right.
because we're taught to really be able to stand our ground, to be able to own our stuff, to be able to win at all costs, to be able to
Mhm.
protect ourselves from, any outside, intrusions and things of that nature. But what it does is, and what I was telling somebody the other day, I was like, what I ended up doing was I ended up building a wall to protect myself.
Yep.
The wall kept me in, but it also kept you out. So what I essentially built was a prison.
Hmm.
And then once you realize that, wait a minute, okay, I had great intentions, but I've cut off the world from me. That's the perspective change. And I was talking to some guys recently, and they were just going in and kind of, complaining about some things. And I asked them a question that really they looked at me like I had three heads. And the question was, let me ask you a question. All of that you just shared with me, if the responsibility to resolve everything you shared with me fell squarely on your shoulders, what would you do?
Mm.
And they were like, huh? So what I'm trying to get you to do is understand that you have to change your perspective. You're harping over results of an approach. That approach is tied to a perspective. Let's go back and look at that. That may change the game for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so huge. So huge.
The thing is that just what hit me is that what you just said can apply to absolutely everything. Everything.
Everything. And it's something that you have to use consistently. It's not, I dare say, and I'm going out on a limb when I say this, but I dare say it's something you never master.
Yep.
It's something that you are consistently, because different scenarios, different stages of life. I've been married 22 years now, so I'm a different stage of life. My youngest child is 19, about to be 20. I am a grandfather now. I have a 2-year-old grandson. A very different time in life, which now causes me to look at my perspective.
Right.
Like, how do I want to show up? And how does that tie to my ideologies and how I'm viewing the world, the lens that I'm looking through as it relates to family, as it relates to business, because now I'm growing a business as well. Very different time in life, going from being an employee to a boss, if you will.
Yeah.
Everything's different. So I have to go back and make sure that my perspective now is in alignment with the trajectory of my life so that I'm not tripping over stuff. And I think you got to do that periodically, really just take some inventory and say, hey, how am I showing up? What are the things that I'm subscribing to? What are the ideologies that I hold dear? Are they working for me? Or are they not?
Right.
I really do think it's the purpose of life. I think it's the purpose of life.
Yeah.
Because you're right, you're never going to master it. I dare say you're never going to master it. Even the Gandhis and the Mandelas of the world didn't master it, right? Like we're always constantly growing, but like to be able to like understand ourselves, to really like to continue to keep mastering that. It's a fun game. And when you look at it, and I look at that like she's trying to change me. Like now I think about that's a bad thing. Like, right? Like now it's like, yeah, I'm glad, because I wouldn't be here talking to you if it wasn't for those pushes. I wouldn't,
That's right.
I wouldn't be running my business for almost 5 years if it wasn't for those pushes. Like the things in my life wouldn't have happened if it wouldn't have been for those things.
That's right. And I agree with you 100%. My wife and I had a conversation recently. So before we got married, I literally said this to her over dinner. I said, I don't want you to change because I'm never going to change. You remember the guy I described when I got married? That guy said he was never going to change. That guy with the singular mindset and the crazy badge of honor. He said over dinner, he's never going to change. Can you imagine if that had happened?
Yeah.
And she was like, okay, I'm down for the ride. We'll see about that.
Right. You know what I mean? And now I tell folk, man, she treats me like the man I should be, which is baffling to me. I can't even describe to you. Like it's hard to describe to a couple how to even do that. But what it did for me was it was a motivator, because now I'm consistently trying to figure out how to live up to how she's treating me.
Mm. Yeah, that is amazing. I think that's like a perfect way to end it, 'cause I know you have a hard stop. That's a perfect way to leave our audience thinking about that.
Yeah, it's, it's important. I'm enjoying this journey. I'm enjoying being able to share it. And that's all I do, man. Share my journey in hopes that it will be an encouragement and an inspiration to others on their journey. Listen, you keep putting one foot in front of the other, you're going to get somewhere.
Right.
And you're going to get further along than where you are right now.
Right. Oliver, what's the name of your book?
The name of the book is Overcoming the Man Laws, for the man who wants to be his best despite what he was taught.
I love that. That is awesome.
Overcoming.
Oliver, I'm going to reach out to you after this too. I'd love to have you on my podcast as well.
Please do. I'll be honored.
I think we could have some incredible conversation around all of this. We could dive deep into some of this stuff, because I think we've lived some similar things.
Indeed. Please. I'd be honored to come on and chop it up with you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I knew you would like each other.
As soon as we started talking, I'm like, all right, yeah, we're aligned, we're good. Which always happens. So Barbara, you're great at finding the people.
It's awesome, man. It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure. Thank you for allowing me to just ramble on. I appreciate it.
How do people find you? How do people find you, Oliver?
So if you're a social media person, if you look up Denali, it's DEN. It's the first three letters of my wife's name, Denise, OLI, which is the first three letters of my name, LLC, Denali LLC, on all social media, everywhere.
Okay.
You can find me there. And then I'll give you guys a link for your show notes for folk who don't feel like searching. They can just click on it.
Perfect. We'll add that in. That's the best.
Okay.
Oliver, man, thank you so much for coming
Thank you
on.
both.
That was incredible.
Thank you both. I appreciate it. My pleasure.
Absolutely. All right. Everybody else, man, this is a good one. This is one you can take back and apply some immediate stuff and start moving forward. And like Oliver said, do you still do knucklehead things? Do you still make bad decisions? Yeah, the transformation isn't like all of a sudden you have this like enlightenment, you have this enlightening thought, and you're the new person completely the next day. You still have your thoughts, you still have your perspective, you still have your like man laws, right?
That's right.
I love that.
It takes that work. So if you've had some enlightenment like me and Barb, I know I've had today listening to Oliver, I'd say start that journey now and realize that you're still going to make mistakes, but it's that journey.
Yeah. So bye, everybody. Have a great week. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Absolutely.
Have a great week.
Indeed.
Awesome. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Oh. I forgot when I said bye that I didn't hit